Hello, fictional. Welcome to the What If Issei. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei was the true dragon of the apocalypse? Part 3. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Issei looked at the large lake that loomed in front of him with stars in his eyes. The first time he had come to these parts, he had heard the movement of the water, but he had not imagined something so big. Many relatives were lounging in the trees, bathing, or just playing with each other, creating a friendly atmosphere. A small layer of steam rising above the crystal clear water gave a hint that the lake was at a slightly warm temperature, ideal for relaxing with a nice bath at normal temperature. Tiamat put her hands on her hips with a small smile. This place is perfect. Whenever I'm looking to relax, take a bath, or both, I always come here. Issei leaned both of his fists forward in excitement, indicating that he agreed with Tiamat. It's a gigantic hot spring. This is amazing. As unbelievable as it seemed, for the first time, Issei didn't imagine a bunch of naked girls in the water, waiting for him to go in with them. His excitement at the whole thing is genuine, without any malicious ideas behind it. Drake thought seriously, then put a rather silly grin on his face. You're growing up, partner. Well then Tiamat walked over to the water and dipped her hand in, then closed her eyes in satisfaction after feeling the temperature. We'd better not waste any more time. Huh? Issei blinked several times in confusion. Quickly, his confused expression began to change to a nervous one. Wait a second, we haven't split up yet. For a large glow surrounded Tiamat, causing Issei to look away as he realized that his clothes had begun to disappear. A large unbelievable blush appeared on her face as Tiamat continued to touch the water with a calm look in her eyes. You can't do that if I'm in front of you. Issei exclaimed as he looked away in great embarrassment. What's wrong with that? A loud splash was heard, giving Issei permission to take another look at Tiamat, who was already deep in the water, and half of her beak were covered by the thick steam, sparing the protagonist's nostrils. Dragons always bathe naked in front of other dragons. It's a sign of trust we have among the species. We're not as delicate as humans on that subject. Tiamat replied with a smirk. Have you already forgotten that I am a human? Shouted Issei as he looked away and pointed at himself as an idiot. Tiamat raised her index finger with an amused look on her face. You were human. But now you are a demon. Tiamat declared with an air of grace in his words. She was actually having fun with this situation. How long had it been since she had been amused by something so trivial? To think of it. Had she ever? Issei glared at Tiamat while blatantly pointing at her. That's right, I'm a demon. A beeping demon, not a dragon. And that has nothing to do with it really. I was raised on human principles, and it's completely normal for me to act and think like a human. Right after those words, a large amount of water completely washed over Issei, causing him to spit out a small stream of water. Stop making excuses and come at once. Tiamat gave him a mischievous grin. Unless you want to get wet again, but with slightly colder water. A small shiver ran down Issei's back. He didn't think twice and began to take off his clothes with a big blush on his face. Tiamat was just staring at him, not taking her eyes off him. Issei hadn't noticed due to his great discomfort that the dragoness wandered a little with her gaze between his torso and neck, though it was only for a short second. Finally, Issei only needed to remove her chazers. Can you turn around? I'd like to keep my human dignity unpunished for a little while longer, Issei declared as he looked sideways at her with a big blush on his face. Tiamat just rolled her eyes. Fine. Tiamat looked straight ahead as she wondered a couple of things. Why do humans feel so ashamed when it comes to showing their sexual organ to others? Maybe it's to defend their dignity. Tiamat placed a hand on her chin as she thought seriously. But what kind of dignity should they have if their dignity is valued when it comes to protecting their sexual organs? Compared to the dignity of dragons, it's pretty ridiculous obviously. That doesn't mean you should walk around naked all the time, because that would be disrespectful. Why the beep am I even thinking this? Tiamat finally thought, rolling her eyes. The dragoness looked to her side as she caught the movement of the water, only to realize that Issei had already gotten in for a swim, several feet away from her. Enjoying it? Tiamat asked with a small smile as she saw that Issei had a very calm expression on his face, being that a few seconds ago he looked like a talking tomato. That's great. Was Issei's simple reply as he stretched his arms back and rested them on the rocks. Tiamat mimicked his movement, making her beep even more visible and pronounced than they already were. The amused air around Tiamat changed to her usual serious atmosphere, causing Issei to become a little serious as well. Regarding your training, I don't know if I'll be able to help you. Tiamat replied while looking at the sky seriously. Why? Issei asked with some disappointment behind his words. Tiamat lowered her gaze and looked at him seriously. Because today is the last day you're here and we're not sure what time your mistress. Tiamat replied with a hint of venom in her last word. Issei caught Tiamat's tone but decided to leave it for later. You're right, today is the last day. Issei looked at the whole place around him with some regret. He really had liked it. But until they find me it might take a little longer. The president told me that my pieces didn't link to my soul as they should have. And as a result, she can't track me with the power of her pieces. And Tiamat hummed at Issei's last words. She had never heard that demonic pieces could fail, even in a small way. But it was also true that she had barely been involved with such knowledge for obvious reasons. Anyway, it would be best not to waste time. Tiamat stood up, causing Issei to look away. At the very least, I'd like to prove a couple of things to you before you leave. Issei blinked once, confused by the tone of Tiamat's last words. He was sure they sounded somewhat discouraged. 3 days with someone must not be a long time for someone who was alone for a millennium. Issei thought with some pity, but decided not to mention anything about it, as he didn't know how the dragoness might react. Line jumping. Do you have any questions before we begin? Tiamat asked with a raised eyebrow. Issei rubbed his hair nervously. Do you still hate demons? Issei's question startled Tiamat a little, causing the dragoness to look at him with both eyebrows raised in a piercing manner. Out of fear, Issei quickly waved his hands in defense. You shouldn't answer me if you don't want to. I was only wondering because you seemed really angry earlier when you mentioned my president. I hate demons. Issei looked at the dragoness with great surprise, her cold, piercing gaze causing Issei to pucker her lips at the answer. They are a foul, treacherous, crawling, impertinent, obstinate, and meddlesome species. I hate the 3 factions, but I hate the demons even more for what they are. I would never trust one of them. Issei lowered his head in sorrow after hearing those words, something that did not go unnoticed by Tiamat. But, you're special. Tiamat exclaimed as she pointed at him seriously, causing Issei to look up in great surprise. Special? Issei wondered, not understanding the true meaning of the word. Issei was staring very hard at Tiamat, waiting for her answer. She's referring to my power, mate. Thanks to it, you were unaffected by demonic corruption, and that makes you someone special, Drake explained proudly after emphasizing his power, while Issei's eyes sparkled after finding the realization. Oh, that's right. I had completely forgotten about it, he stated somewhat apologetically for having forgotten something so important. The power of a celestial dragon can prevent demonic corruption. That explains a lot, Tiamat thought with an air of mystery about him that Issei could not detect, but his companion could. By the way, Drake, have you been well these days? You're talking a lot less than usual, Issei asked, rather intrigued as he looked down at his gauntlet. It's better if I don't talk. Tiamat's cold and sinister aura made Issei find an answer immediately. I can't stand that grating, whining voice of the underdeveloped lizard. The dragoness's tone made Issei turn a little pale. Anyway. The aura broke completely and everything returned to normal, causing Issei to give an inward sigh. Let's get it over with. Attack me. After those words, Tiamat placed both hands in her pockets as she watched him piercingly. I won't do anything at first. I just want to know how strong you are. Are you sure? Asked Issei worriedly, causing Tiamat to frown slightly. Alright. It's not like I'm underestimating you, he quickly replied nervously, then turned serious and entered a combat stance. I'm no fool. I know she's much stronger than me, so I shouldn't worry about her. Is that a fighting stance? Wondered Tiamat with a bored expression on her face as she saw Issei's ridiculous pose. I'm beginning to doubt her mistress's competence regarding training and sparring. Though it's also true that she's a mere brat, I shouldn't have expected too much. Issei's gauntlet glowed brightly, covering her figure almost completely, and she lashed out at full speed at Tiamat. The dragoness just stood there with her hands in her pocket as she received a hard right to her cheek that turned her head slightly. Issei didn't stop there. The gauntlet was getting a strong glow for every right and left that she was hitting as fast as she could across the dragon's body. After about 15 consecutive blows, the aura finally stopped appearing, indicating that the boost had reached its limit. Tiamat didn't overlook this and finally made a move as he grabbed both of Issei's arms, stopping his attack in its tracks, leaving the chestnut completely shocked after seeing that he didn't even have a scratch on him. That's all your power? Sensing that his question was a provocation, Issei gritted his teeth hard and tried to free himself from the grip, failing miserably. Therefore, he resorted to plan B. Issei gave her a hard kick to her crotch that took her by surprise, causing her to let go of the chestnut's hands. Issei quickly jumped backwards to get a little away, while Tiamat looked at him with a surprised look on her face. If I had been a man, that might have hurt a little. Tiamat said as she looked down at his crotch, causing Issei to roll his eyes. But that didn't stop him from wasting Tiamat's inattention. This is my chance. Issei thought as he charged his fist with a great amount of force to punch her in the abdomen. This sensation, the feeling, the direction, it's an incredible punch. Issei had a small flashback of when he sent Rainer flying with a punch. It's even better than that time. Issei connected his fist with fate, generating a small blizzard around the blow. Tiamat's hair blended seamlessly with the gusts of wind, indicating that it had been a really strong blow. Even if that blow could have hit a high-class demon, that meant it had certainly done a bit of damage. It would have tickled me if you had chosen the right place to send that blow. Tiamat's face right now really scary. Issei's eyes were as wide as saucers, in complete shock, still with his head down. I didn't move her even an inch, who the hell is she really? To take on a really strong opponent, Issei broke away from Tiamat as he reacted to her words, then tried to deliver a strong punch to her face which Tiamat caught without any difficulty. You also need to be really strong. But Tiamat used Issei's hand as a support to bring his whole body to his back in less than a second as he took a step forward and bent his knee. If the two of you are equally powerful, Tiamat pulled Issei's arm, causing the young man's entire body to pass over hers and slam hard into the ground, causing him to vomit some blood in progress. The one with the greater technique and experience will be the winner. Issei froze when she saw how Tiamat's foot was practically already over her head, but passed within a couple of centimeters of her skin. In a small fraction of a second, he thought she had missed, but realized she hadn't when he felt every fiber of his skin being blown away by a staggering blizzard that produced Tiamat's kick, sending him flying into the wall. Issei quickly got up with a bit of difficulty as he wiped a trickle of blood from his mouth. A small smile broke out on his face. She's extraordinary, he thought as he stared at her. In the opposite case, Issei watched very carefully as Tiamat raised her index finger. If your opponent is much stronger than you and is just as good at their respective techniques and combat experience, you're simply finished. Issei let a bead of sweat drop nervously at Tiamat's rather cold sincerity. If the opposite is the case, you'll tear him to shreds. A small mysterious smile would creep across Tiamat's face, causing her to look at her very intently. But, if you are both equally powerful and you have the clearer concepts, then, you could wear yourself out far less than necessary to defeat him. You might even have a chance to defeat a stronger opponent with a good strategy, as long as the guy is not smarter and more strategic than you about battles. Wear me down less? Issei asked with some intrigue. Tiamat positioned her hands on her waist earnestly. I'll give you an example. Suppose I am now using 100% of my power. But, if I use my experience and knowledge and techniques, Tiamat gave a sly little smile as she extended her palm towards Issei, causing the protagonist to look at her with great surprise. I would only need to use 50% to be able to defeat you. Even less, but in that case it wouldn't be a battle to save energy anymore, I'd just be toying with you to make it last a little longer for the thrill of real combat. I see. Issei exclaimed as he raised his arms in great excitement. Actually, I'm not even using my 1%, but I can't tell him that or he'll be quite disappointed. Tiamat thought with a bit of grace in her words. Tiamat sharpened her gaze, causing Issei to visibly tense. Tiamat's outstretched palm turned into a provocation as she invited him to face her. Come and attack whenever you want. I'll be sure to show you the difference in technique that exists between us. He didn't have to tell her twice. Issei quickly rushed towards the beautiful woman and attempted to lunge at her. Tiamat's eyes glowed a light blue color as she watched Issei's fists come at her in a very clear way. Right, Tiamat tilted her body to the side, dodging it completely. Her light blue eyes quickly darted to Issei's other arm, which was starting to prepare a strike. Left, Tiamat dodged it again smoothly with blistering speed, leaving Issei genuinely surprised. Tiamat's eyes would quickly dart to the right. Right, he dodged the blow again with no trouble. Repeat, thought the dragoness, and this time without even needing to see Issei's next blow to dodge her left jab even faster than the previous time. His punches are super basic and easy to dodge, plus he doesn't know how to use a feint. Tiamat thought as she closed her eyes and continued to dodge it without any trouble. Although it was super easy for Tiamat, Issei was totally shocked by the display of power she was being subjected to. She continued to dodge everything at a speed that was becoming a blur to his eyes. Adding the factor that she was using her maximum speed and power in her punches, it was resulting in accelerated exhaustion. Now, he could understand much better the word exhaustion and why he should avoid it. Time to put the pressure on him. Tiamat thought as she opened her eyes with a menacing air. She dodged one of his blows with her usual normality, then looked at the left side of Issei's torso, indicating where her blow was going to land. Quickly, he began to prepare his fist to strike. Issei's eyes immediately caught Tiamat's intent, causing him to place his gauntlet in the trajectory to defend and counterattack. To the left. Tiamat's eyes narrowed with a flash of cunning. By the right, Issei's eyes widened in shock and he began to writhe in pain as he felt how Tiamat's left jab had sunk into the right side of his stomach. Tiamat took a couple of steps back as he waited for Issei to recover from the blow. That's called a feint. Remember it well. It's very basic, but it could give you the trump card in a battle. But only use it when you're sure your opponent is overwhelmed by your moves. Also, you must exert incredible mental pressure, not only with your fake attack, but also with a sharp gaze that is projecting where the impact is going to hit, as if you are really going to strike there. Tiamat's gaze hardened slightly, causing Issei to get a small shiver down his spine. We'll also have to work on your variety of strikes. You suck. Issei clutched his chest tightly as an arrow engraved with the pestas pierced his chest. A heavy footstep from Tiamat would bring Issei back to reality. Why do you have that look on your face? We're not done yet. Issei swallowed deeply as he got into a fighting stance again. This time, I'll make sure I don't fall for one of his tricks again. By the looks of it, he'll be more attentive to feints, though that won't entirely save him. Feinting is just one of the many varieties I can use during a fight, not counting my magic power. Tiamat thought calculatingly, then stepped into a combat stance. If you won't come, then I will. Issei gritted his teeth in shock as Tiamat began to run towards him with a menacing stance. Without much time to think, he attempted to answer her blow with another blow. Don't try to defend against a blow with another blow if you're not sure. Tiamat grabbed his forearm without any difficulty and deflected the blow into nothingness while delivering a large palm strike to Issei's stomach. Even though it was open-handed, the blow was a bit devastating, making Issei vomit saliva. Tiamat didn't end up lashing out like the previous times, passing her fist inches away from his face and making small cuts on Issei's skin, thanks to the strong blizzard, besides almost flying away. She didn't stop there and quickly moved and turned her back to Issei at a high speed, then grabbed him from behind and grabbed him hard by the neck with both her hands, then spun around at high speed for a couple of turns until she finally released him and sent him flying, crashing hard into the cave wall. I guess this is it, Tiamat thought aloud as she watched Issei remain sprawled on the ground. But she was surprised when a large red glow came from the gauntlet, indicating that she had achieved another multiplier. He could still go further. Thought the dragoness with slightly widened eyes as she watched Issei struggle to his feet. It's not that he's evolving during combat. That means he must at least have a pretty clear motivation to continue fighting. And to progress, that's a very important thing. Issei finally stood up and shouted loudly as he ran towards Tiamat full of slits. Tiamat's eyes narrowed in disappointment. However, that motivation will not serve to make him strong in a short time. For that, you need another kind of motivation that I cannot teach you. Tiamat ducked and tilted her head slightly to the side, dodging Issei's punch that passed by the side of her face. A tiny smile appeared on her face as she delivered a hard punch to his stomach that lifted him slightly off the ground, generating a small blizzard from the impact. Tiamat slowly withdrew her arm and used her body to support the unconscious Issei. The dragoness gave him a small smile and tightened her grip on his back to enclose him in a warm embrace. But, even if I can't teach it to you, I know you'll learn it eventually. And that's because you have the mentality of someone strong. Line jump. President, do you have any idea why we were called here? Asked Kiba as he looked at the huge structure where the Grimoires lived. That's right, they were currently in hell. Rhea snorted in annoyance. I already told my brother about all the problems I have with Haidu, so I don't think he'll call me to talk about my security. Rhea shook his head with some amusement. He was so happy when I mentioned my new acquisition to him. But his smile quickly faded when I told him that my control over him is practically nil. The Kendo delivered one of his typical chuckles. Don't worry, President. Haidu is very grateful to you, I'm sure he'll abide by all his orders without a second thought. Speaking of Issei, Asia added. Weren't we supposed to look for him today? Rhea gave a tired sigh. That's right. I was planning to do it now, but this unplanned meeting just came up. And best of all, we have a meeting today and another one tomorrow morning. Rhea commented with clear sarcasm in his last words. I think you can survive another day without any problem. Kaneko stated nonchalantly as she waited for the maids to open the door. As expected, the doors opened. The entire Rhea's retinue, plus the Redeed herself, bowed in a big bow to show the Grimoire patriarch some well-deserved respect. Hello, father. Forgive my insolence, but I would like to know why I was called, so Rhea raised her gaze, going completely blank as she realized that the man standing in front of her was not her father. When Rhea shut up so abruptly, the others raised their heads, only to get the same shocked expression from Rhea's. Ahahaha. The laughter rang out in an eerie way. Father, huh? I like the sound of that. But just call me that when you're in bed with me, Rhea's. Razor. Line jump. He was warm, his whole body. The sound of burning wood could be heard in the background. Probably a campfire. It was all dark, probably because he hadn't fully woken up yet and hadn't opened his eyes. Oh, God was all Issei could think as he felt a very comforting caress felt on his cheek. It felt great, and whoever it was, she didn't want him to stop. That hand, it was extremely soft and caressed him with great affection. Not even his mother had ever caressed him like that, although that woman was not a good example really. He felt how his body was positioned, the space he was in. He was sitting. He could feel how his two legs were slightly curled up with two other legs. He could feel how his back was resting in great comfort on an extremely soft surface. He could also feel how another hand was holding his waist, hugging him lovingly and making their bodies stay closer to each other. He could feel how his head was lying on two huge mounds, soft, round, firm but soft at the same time. His head felt like it was on the best pillow on the planet. She could also feel someone resting their chin on top of her head, indicating how relaxed she was, just like him. Issei opened his eyes slowly, everything was completely white, and the discomfort he expected to have after his worst battle so far, mysteriously, did not present itself. For sure, that person had taken good care of him all those hours he was unconscious. Finally, Issei's eyes adjusted to the light, and the first thing he could see were piercing, contented, beautiful and calm light blue eyes that were staring at him very intently. That face, Issei thought unconsciously as he admired it. That face conveyed a great deal of tranquility, trust, concern, affection and gratitude. How is it that they could deceive this woman? A small twinge appeared in his heart when he thought those words. It was probably an answer he could never find, and if he did find it, he would never understand it anyway. Are you alright? I think I was too hard on you for a first time, Tiamat inquired, still holding her previous expression, but her concern and guilt showed through her tone. Issei closed his eyes and smiled genuinely at Tiamat's concern, letting himself get caught up in the moment and hugging her tightly. Tiamat's reaction was much different than usual as she tightened her embrace around Issei's waist and rested her chin more affectionately on top of the chestnut's head. To tell you the truth, it was kind of hard. But I feel amazing. I don't know how you healed me, but I really appreciate it. I'm glad to hear that. They both closed their eyes, enjoying the caresses and bear hug they were giving each other at the moment. Perhaps, the expression of affection was getting a little out of hand. But would they really think about it? Tiamat hadn't felt the warmth and affection of another person in a millennium. Whereas Issei hadn't even experienced such a thing in his short life. They felt too good to walk away from each other. They liked the feeling of warmth all over their bodies. They liked having another person show them true affection. They simply wanted to experience the feeling of being loved by another person. But still, that strange warmth that began to invade both of their bodies. That warmth that finally parked itself in their hearts was not a simple desire for friendly affection. But they were both too comfortable to realize that at the moment. They just wanted to enjoy the moment, their closeness. What is it that motivates you to become stronger? Tiamat's question broke the extremely comfortable silence that had settled for several minutes. My motivation? I guess my president, Ria's Gremory. Tiamat pursed her lips at the answer. Not only because she felt a small pang of jealousy that this woman should be her motivation and not her, but also because she was a foul demon. She gave me a second chance in my life. I want to become stronger to protect her. Her, and everyone I consider important to me. Like you. A practically imperceptible blush appeared on Tiamat's face as she looked down at Issei's face, who was extremely comfortable and calm, sleeping on both of her beep. Issei chuckled slightly under his breath, causing Tiamat to raise an eyebrow in intrigue. Though for the moment, it'll have to be the other way around between you and me, since you're much stronger for now. Tiamat looked up with a smile on her face. If Issei had been wide-eyed, he would have said it was that genuine smile that Tiamat gave off once in a while, like the one when she told him she'd be staying with her for a couple of days. I hummed happily. I don't think you'll ever get over me. Wanna bet? Issei asked with a small chuckle at the end. Tiamat hummed happily again. If you ever surpass me, you can ask me for anything you want. Alright. Issei declared without any malicious thoughts from behind, causing Drake to puff out his chest in pride again. So, what is it that I must promise? He asked with a small teasing tone. Never leave me. Issei's eyes widened with great surprise at hearing Tiamat's statement. She had a completely serious face, in fact, it looked more like a threat than a request. But Issei knew she wasn't like that because he learned to see her eyes. And her eyes denoted sadness, loneliness, fear. Fear that he would leave her alone and that everything would go back to being just as cold, quiet and horrible as before. I promise. Issei said in a rather serious tone and without even a millisecond's hesitation. This made Tiamat's chest warm in a way she had never felt before. Now, nor ever. A myriad of mixed emotions erupted inside her chest and stomach because of Issei. But somehow he found a method to show those feelings. She gave him a huge toothy grin, showing her beautiful fangs. She had her eyelids closed, but the rims of her eyes were a little wet from her tears, which never fell. Thank you. If Issei was already very surprised by Tiamat's smile, he was more so now to hear her tone so cheerful and truly grateful. Line jump. Brother. Riaz slapped the table loudly in great frustration. You've got to be kidding me. Riaz looked at his parents with the same expression. And you guys are okay with this? Riaz's entourage only remained silent out of respect, though that didn't mean they agreed with what was going on. Calm down, Riaz. I haven't finished my statement yet. The younger red-haired man replied with a serious air about him. At this, Riaz could only continue to listen. I agree to bring the wedding forward and celebrate it in a month's time. But only on 2 conditions. Razor's stupid grin was completely wiped off after listening. What are those conditions, Surziches? Relax, Razor. It's something very simple. Commented the now introduced Surziches. My sister has a chance to play a rating game against you. And the second is that anyone who is interested in breaking into the wedding and taking Riaz as fiancé may do so, though said subject must beat you in a one-on-one before they can take my sister's hand. The clipped silence came over the room for a few seconds. Razor was completely serious in that silence. But out of nowhere, the silence was broken by Razor's small chuckle, which then turned into a laugh. Alright, I accept those conditions. Razor exclaimed, completely sure of his victory. On both the first, as well as the second condition. Riaz and his entourage looked at each other very seriously as they saw that they had a chance to free themselves from Razor. Surziches stood up from his chair, making everyone look at him intently. I think that's it for today. It's already very late, so get a good night's rest. Tomorrow we'll agree on a date and time for the rating game. Everyone nodded, content with the outcome of the meeting. What Razor didn't know was that his ego and pride played a trick on him. Line jump. Hey, don't you think they're taking too long? Tiamat rested her chin on Issei's head after speaking her mind. They were both still in the same position as before, the only thing different were some blankets covering them to get them through the extreme cold of the night. Inwardly, though, they loved that cold as they snuggled even more with each other, having the sub-zero temperature as an excuse. Maybe they'll come tomorrow, Issei commented in a sleepy voice. Damn. I'm going to be here for 4 days and I still didn't get any familiars. Why the hell do all the familiars hate me, except the ones that are perverts? Issei rambled aloud, causing Tiamat to stare at him. She knew that those familiars were only attracted to people who had a large sexual appetite, though she preferred not to tell him so as not to embarrass him. A faint smile crept across Issei's face. Come to think of it, it's not all that bad. He continued to ramble unconsciously. It's great to be able to spend another day with you. He unconsciously declared, already collapsing from exhaustion and falling asleep with his head resting on Tiamat's fluffy beep. Tiamat only deigned to watch him for his last words. She watched him for a long minute. Her light blue eyes glittered with mystery. It was impossible to know what she was thinking now. Until finally, she came to a conclusion. I think if you stay away from me for more than a day I couldn't bear it. Tiamat stated quietly as she stopped stroking Issei's cheek and positioned her palm on the hand where Issei activated his gauntlet. His light blue eyes glowed with great longing for a short second. Really, I couldn't bear it. Issei's hand glowed a light blue color, while Tiamat's abdomen glowed at the same time with the same intensity and color. Issei slowly opened his eyes, everything was dark. The day before he had slept like never before and his contented face was proof of it. All the memories of yesterday made him feel really happy. When he first met Tiamat, he had simply thought of escaping anyway because of the danger and emotional instability she presented. But now that he knew her better, he realized that she is a good woman with a rather strange character, but very nice, no doubt. Without him and her realizing it, the two had become good friends in just 4 days. Surely it was due to the great loneliness that exploded in Tiamat after being a millennium without company, and on Issei's part he had felt quite empathetic towards her, as they had been through very similar things. I never thought I could sleep so well in a cave. Issei tried to stretch her arms out, realizing that one of them was stuck under something. Before he could think what was going on, the familiar smell and the touch he received on his forehead from another forehead caused a small smile to emerge on his face. Slowly, but surely, he began to pull back the blankets covering his face, only to see a large amount of beautiful light blue hair spread out in various directions as he pulled back the blankets. Finally, he managed to pull it back to the side of her face to see how Tiamat had her forehead pressed to his as she slept with a very serious face, but with an aura of tranquility around her. Her long silky hair was strewn all over the makeshift bed, giving the dragoness a rather beautiful appearance. Tiamat frowned slightly as she felt the coldness begin to invade her body, pressing her nose to Issei's. Her arms wrapped around Issei's back, pulling him into a tight, delicate embrace, seeking to snuggle his body against hers as much as possible. As comfortable as Issei felt right now, he had a duty to get up. Hey, wake up. It's morning. Tiamat opened her eyes, meeting Issei's eyes instantly due to their closeness. Are you going to look for your mistress? The dragoness asked, not moving an inch from her position. Issei noticed that her tone seemed somewhat misguided, and he obviously knew why. I promise I'll be back before you know it. Issei's face grew serious. But for now, I must catch up on my studies. Issei looked up with a small smile on his face. Come to think of it, I don't know how I'll be able to dissuade Mitsuda and Motohama. What about your parents and others? Tiamat asked with some intrigue. Issei chuckled dryly at her question. My parents must not even have been aware of my absence, since my two best friends are on bad terms with them and don't dare come to my house. As for the other people, to be honest with you, apart from my friends at the club, Mitsuda and Motohama are the only people who know of my existence. I feel quite honored that I have come across your existence. Issei was a little surprised by Tiamat's words. Usually, that comment could be taken as sarcastic, but the very occasional, very special smile that appeared on Tiamat's face made it very clear to him that she wasn't being sarcastic. Before Issei could respond to the sudden comment, Tiamat raised her face slightly towards the entrance of the cave, causing Issei to follow her gaze. Apparently we have visitors. Tiamat said with her typical apathetic expression. Wow, it's the dragons that tried to kill me last time. Issei would point discriminatingly, making the three dragons present a little nervous at the memory of what happened. What are you waiting for, come on in. Issei declared with a toothy grin, causing the three dragons to quickly bow for their hospitality. This is my home, you know. Tiamat commented with a roll of her eyes as she watched Issei invite without asking her first. Line jump. If Razor wins the rating game, the marriage will be in a month and 15 days. Surzich's statement caused everyone assembled to nod seriously, except for Razor, who had a stupid grin on his face. The rating game? Riaz queried with a clear impatience in his tone, almost jumping out of his chair. Surzich's would flash a delicate smile at his sister, indicating for her to calm down a bit. 2 weeks from now. Biba, Kaneko, Asia and Akeno looked at each other with slightly widened eyes. 2 weeks, that's too short a time. They thought in unison. Alright. Riaz stated, stopping abruptly, leaving everyone present a little surprised by his curt attitude. Wait, Riaz. We haven't even. I'm sorry, father. Interrupted the girl as the rest of her entourage stood up. But if we only have 2 weeks, I can't waste any more time here. The Redid replied, striding out of the dining room, followed by her entire entourage. Everyone present would just shake their heads at their daughter-sister's attitude, while Razor folded his arms with an arrogant smile on his face. She doesn't even have all her pieces. This is going to be really fun, as the whole royal family will be watching me crush that spoiled brat. Thought the phoenix with great confidence of his victory. President, what do you plan to do? Asked Asia seriously as she followed closely behind. First we have to find Haidu. In these 2 weeks I will squeeze him as much as possible so that he can become the best pawn of the underworld. Riaz said with a clear withering tone, something a bit unbecoming of her. Riaz stopped abruptly and turned away with a palpable seriousness on his face. The same goes for us. We'll have to try our best to win the rating game. Riaz turned his attention to Asia, making the former nun flustered by his stare. Especially you, Asia. You're new as Haidu, so you'll have to level up as quickly as possible. Your sacred gear is very important to me, and that's why I revived you. I know you won't disappoint me. Riaz stated with a small smile at the end, causing the nun to nod quickly. Do you think Issei will achieve that level you mentioned, President? Kaneko asked, no real concern in her words. Riaz's gaze would grow serious and a little dark at the question. He is the Sekiryuite, one of the most feared weapons in the world. It is the least I can expect from my servant, considering its destructive and fearsome potential. Dude, if he fails, a malicious glint would flash across his eyes. I'll make sure he suffers the same as me for being a complete failure. Blind jump. Wawira. The male dragon exclaimed with a small smile on his face as they all shared the food at the campfire. He says it's a shame you're leaving. Tiamat opened her lips slightly to take a mouthful into her mouth, exposing her 2 cute upper fangs. Don't worry, I'll be back fairly quickly. Issei replied with a small smile as he continued to devour the exotic fruits. Brr, said the little dragoness with a big toothy grin. She says when you come back, she wants to play with you. Tiamat commented as she tossed the inedible part of the fruit into the fire. You bet. Issei replied with a toothy grin on his face as he repeated Tiamat's action. Her smile quickly faded as she picked up her backpack that lay next to her. It's about time. He culminated as he glared at Tiamat. Tiamat quickly got up from the ground. Before you go, I would like to tell you something. She stated with her typical expression. Issei would just nod and walk to the entrance of the cave as they were watched by the 3 dragons. What did you want to talk about? Issei inquired as he looked at the horizon seriously. Thank you. Issei looked at her, surprised by her simple word. Thank you for opening my eyes. Thank you for showing me that I can still find happiness in life if I look for it. Thank you for being my friend. Tiamat looked up at him, causing a strong wind to blow her beautiful hair. A big grateful smile appeared on Tiamat's face, making her small fangs visible again. Thank you for everything. Issei stood static for a few seconds due to Tiamat's big beaming smile. When he reacted, he brought his right hand to her shoulder with a small comforting smile on his face. I've said it before, but I promise I'll be back as soon as possible. I still owe you dinner. Issei replied with a big toothy grin. Tiamat placed her hand on top of Issei's affectionately, causing him to be slightly surprised by the gesture. Her surprise grew out of all proportion when she saw a light blue glow appear on her right hand at the same time as a glow of the same hue appeared over Tiamat's beep. With this, it will be much easier for us to communicate. Tiamat commented with a small smile. What is this? Wondered Issei as he looked at the light blue mark on his hand. Doesn't it look like Tiamat's dragon form? He thought as he looked closely at the mark. With this mark, both of us will be able to communicate all the time, as we will be able to talk to each other through a magic circle whenever we want. This will help us a lot when you want to come and visit me. I would only have to use some magic to create a teleport seal, although I could also teleport to your position if you wish. It will also allow me to sense your emotions, knowing exactly when you are in danger. Issei widened his eyes slightly at what he heard. Tiamat shook her head in amusement. You are the Sekiryuite, surely many enemies will want to assassinate you, and I will make sure to prevent it. Issei looked at the mark even more surprised. A single mark can do all that. Exactly. Issei looked at her with great intrigue after her words. That mark is a sign of trust between the two people who wear it. This mark is known as the seal of the familiar. A small blizzard passed between the two while not a word was spoken. The only distinctive thing between the two was Issei's completely shocked expression. Wait a second, Issei finally broke the silence. You're telling me you became my familiar being a dragon, plus you're so much stronger than me? He asked completely in shock, not quite digesting what was happening. Yeah, so what? Tiamat placed both hands on her hips with a raised eyebrow. Issei was even more surprised by her simple answer. You had said that if a dragon becomes a familiar of another dragon it is considered a dishonor among its kind. That's right. Tiamat replied as she nodded with a small smile on her face. So, why? Because Issei would be surprised beyond belief as Tiamat would wrap her arms around him very gently and slowly, hugging him with great warmth and affection. Because you are my friend. She whispered in his ear. Do I need another reason to do this? No, I don't know what to say, Issei declared as he reciprocated the embrace with the same intensity as Tiamat, causing the woman to unconsciously hug him even tighter. You don't need to say anything, just accept it. It's the least I could do after everything you did for me. Tiamat broke away from the embrace slightly to look into his eyes with great seriousness. I just have to tell you that this mark has one major flaw. Never allow your arm to be cut off, or we will lose the connection. Make sure you always have the gauntlet active throughout the fight to try and make sure nothing bad happens. And don't tell anyone, very few are aware of this weakness, and it would be best to keep it that way. She stated very seriously. Issei nodded seriously, knowing it was a very delicate thing. After those words, Tiamat would tighten the embrace slightly again, causing the two to bump noses. Have a safe journey. Tiamat declared with affection in her words. Thank you was all Issei said as he broke away from the embrace. He quickly turned around and raised his hand in farewell. Tiamat just continued to stare at him for several seconds. Finally, she closed her eyes and gave a smile. It was amazing that Issei managed to get so many radiant and sincere smiles out of her in just one day. Definitely, he was very special to her. Tiamat gave an intrigued look to the three dragons who were watching her very attentively. Is something wrong? Tiamat asked, curious. The three dragons knelt down in front of her, causing Tiamat to startle a little. We're sorry we interrupted such an important moment when you were cuddling, Dragon Queen. Interrupted? Tiamat wondered aloud. We were just talking. We slept together because it's so cold at night. Don't misunderstand things. Tiamat replied as an imperceptible blush appeared on her face. The three dragons looked at each other in confusion. Talking. But they were too close, practically invading each other's personal space, and they were so comfortable with each other close. We hear you two are friends, but it seems a little too close to be just friends. The mother dragon spoke, causing the other two to panic a bit as she practically defied Tiamat's word without realizing it. Tiamat lowered her head, darkening her gaze. At this action, the other two dragons were terrified out of their wits and were about to apologize to him. You're right, but I like being with him like this. I don't care what the others think. The three dragons were immensely surprised, and not by her words. It was when she raised her face, as she had a huge blush on her cheeks. Line jump. We finally found you, Ria said as she let out a great sigh of exhaustion. How have you been? Issei consulted with a toothy grin as he approached his fellow demons. Fatal. Kaneko replied simply, causing Issei to stop in her tracks and look at her in confusion, then turn her gaze to Ria's, waiting for an answer. We couldn't look for you yesterday, because I had a meeting at my house. Sorry. Ria's replied with a slightly apologetic tone, then turned serious. The problem comes in what was dictated at the meeting. I've never told you before, but I'm engaged to a man I don't love, she said, lowering her head slightly. she commented as she lowered her head slightly. I don't know what my older brother was thinking, but the point is that the wedding has been moved up several months. Issei just lowered his head slightly, not knowing exactly what to say. Is there any way to cancel the wedding? He finally asked, not trying to indulge Ria's in vain. Ria's seriousness was completely erased, and he would sketch a small smile. There is. Remember the explanation I gave you about the rating games? Issei looked up with a hint of surprise. We'll play a rating game to break your engagement. But you don't have all the pieces yet, the young man clarified as he rubbed his hair in confusion. Rias just nodded with a smile. I may not have all the pieces, but the servants I have are very strong or have impressive skills. That obviously includes you, Issei. The aforementioned smiled at him, seeing that he had quite a bit of confidence placed in him. Ria's smile would falter a bit, making the whole atmosphere a bit more tense. But nothing detracts from the fact that Razor's team is well built and for that very reason is among the best at the moment. We will have to train very hard these days. Especially you, Issei, since you have great potential, you just need to unleash it. That will be achieved with training, and more training. Ria's seriousness was quite palpable in his last words. I will not let you down, President. Issei exclaimed as he raised his fist in determination. By the way, how much time do we have? He asked, slightly embarrassed for not having asked such a key question from the beginning. Rias raised his hand, framing two of his fingers. 2 weeks. I'll make sure you become the best pawn in 2 weeks. Issei nodded vigorously. This was his chance to repay the favor he owed Rias for reviving him, and he intended to make good on it at all costs. Not only because of the favor he owed him, but because he himself knows that the only motivation he has to fight is to keep danger away from his friends, to keep them safe, to make sure nothing bad happens to them. What's the point of fighting if he can't fulfill the only real ambition he has to fight? Line jump. Yes, in the end it was what we had thought. They were delayed by a day because something very important came up. Issei commented quietly, making sure passers-by wouldn't hear him talking to himself as he walked to school after being absent for 3 days. Okay. Did you tell him that I'm your familiar? Tiamat asked from the other side of the small celestial magic circle that was being covered by Issei's hand. Not at the moment. I didn't find the time to say it because of everything that happened. Issei replied seriously as he adjusted his suitcase so it wouldn't fall off his shoulder. What exactly happened? The Dragoness inquired with a clearly curious tone. I can't tell you now, I'm just getting to the academy. Talk to you later. Issei whispered even lower so as not to be overheard, as there were many students on the small bridge in front of Kuo Academy. I understand, have a good one. The small magic circle disappeared, causing Issei to remove his hand from his ear with a small smile. Issei stopped in front of the entrance as he looked at the academy with a small smile. Even though it was only 3 days, it's good to be back. He thought as he took a step inside the academy. Oh ice. The aforementioned looked forward with a small bead of sweat as he watched his 2 friends run towards him. Issei's expression changed again when he saw them closer. What the beep happened to their faces? Issei questioned as he watched in great excitement as their faces were somewhat swollen and bandaged. But Suda slowed down in front of him as he rubbed his bald head nervously. Well, it's just that you weren't around yesterday to rein in the kendo club girls again. Motohama adjusted his glasses as he looked at him very seriously. Don't change the subject, you know you owe us some explanations. Issei just gave a small sigh as he started to slowly move forward, being followed by his 2 best friends who were watching him very carefully. Line jump. 2 weeks without going to the academy? Shouted Issei, practically rising from the couch. That's right. Rias nodded with a smile. We need to focus as much as we can on our training. Issei sat back, giving a big defeated sigh. What will I make up for Mitsuda and Motohama this time? He wondered aloud. You don't have to worry about that. Rias replied, causing Issei to look at her curiously. My family owns the school, so my brother already invented a 2-week curricular excursion for the occult club. No one will be suspicious. Issei clapped his fist in his palm as he nodded in compression. I see. I should never have doubted the president's preparations. Issei exclaimed with conviction, causing everyone to look at each other with a bit of amusement due to his words. President, you still won't tell us where we're going to go. Kiba would make his point as he watched her intently, his typical smile etched on his face. It's a big house in the middle of the forest that belongs to my family. It's located outside of Kuo and a bit away from civilization, so we won't have any kind of trouble using our powers. Rias clarified as he stood up from his seat and looked at them seriously. The limo should be arriving soon, let's go. They all nodded and followed their mistress. Line jump. She wasn't lying when she said it was a big house, Issei thought, as he looked at the huge 3-story house that stood in front of him. The structure was completely surrounded by trees and some really tall rock formations that were nearby. They all entered the house and settled into their respective rooms. The house inside was somewhat luxurious, but not to overdo it. Mind you, Issei was sure that the comfort of this place was far above that of his home. After everyone had settled in, Riaz called them to the table to explain the different training sessions they would be doing during the week. Asia, I need you to focus on your magical training. You must learn to channel your magic freely, it will make your sacred gear much more effective when you need to heal someone. Riaz shot a glance at the protagonist. The same goes for you, Issei. I know you barely possess any magical power, but when you manage to load a good amount of power-ups into your body, I'm sure your magical reserves will also skyrocket, as well as your physical strength, stamina and other qualities. Issei just nodded in understanding as he continued to listen. In addition to learning how to use your magic, you should also train your physical fitness and stamina as much as possible. Riaz frowned slightly with a piercing look. I'm not going to lie to you, this is going to be a hard thing for you. I know you like to train, but I'm also sure you've never done such exhaustive training. Issei sweat coldly as he listened to her without saying a word. Meanwhile, you guys Riaz looked at Kaneko, Kiba, and Akeno. I don't think I need to tell you where you need to improve. The three just nodded, knowing what they should do. Riaz turned his gaze back to Issei with a small smile. If you need help with physical training, don't hesitate to ask Kaneko, as she is the one who specializes the most in that area. Issei and Kaneko looked at each other without saying a word for a few seconds. I don't think that's necessary. Issei replied with a smile on her face, leaving everyone present surprised. Issei clenched his right fist tightly, causing a light blue dragon mark to appear on it. I'm sure if my familiar helps me with the training, there won't be any problems. Familiar? Everyone asked in confusion. Issei nodded with a goofy grin on his face. That's right. Issei put one foot on the table dramatically. He's incredibly strong, and I know he'll be able to help me with my training. His name is… Kaneko would punch him hard in the stomach, causing Issei to writhe in pain. Don't rest your feet on top of the table. It's disrespectful. The white-haired girl glared at him as she looked at him with her typical expression. If you want to train with your familiar, I have no problem with that. But remember, if you need help, don't hesitate to ask me. I just hope it's not an excuse not to train hard, Issei. Asia added with a dangerous look on her face, making Issei immediately nervous. How do you think, Asia? You'll see for yourself. He replied as he rubbed his hair nervously. Will your familiar be able to help you with magic as well? Asked Riaz with great intrigue. Yes. She has a great deal of magical power, and I'm sure she could teach me various tricks. She? Is she a woman? Akeno asked with some curiosity. My. She must be quite human-like if you manage to decipher her gender. Actually, it wasn't that hard, Issei clarified as he rubbed his cheek with a small blush as he remembered Tiamat's beautiful face, along with her very feminine anatomy. Can you introduce us to that familiar? Riaz consulted with great curiosity. Well, that Issei ducked his head, chagrined. She hates demons, she won't want to be among you, unless it's an emergency. They all looked at each other with a mixture of confusion and intrigue. But you're a demon, Kiba finally spoke, breaking the silence. Issei rubbed his hair somewhat embarrassed. That has an explanation. She said I was special because of Drake's power. That makes me very different from the average demon, according to her. They all looked at each other with slight frowns at his words, but said nothing. Did I say something wrong? Issei asked in confusion as he saw that everyone was more serious than usual. It's nothing, you can start your training now. Riaz replied with a small smile, then looked around at everyone. I want everyone to be here before midnight. Yes. Everyone replied in unison, leaving Riaz and Asia alone at the table to begin their magical training. Issei and Kaneko nodded to each other as a gesture of farewell, as they did with Akeno. Issei. Kiba put a hand on her shoulder. If you want to have a friendly fight against a swordsman, don't be shy to ask me. Issei turned around, then gave a small bow. Thank you, Prince Charming. I'll keep that in mind. Kiba just sweated his partner's attitude. Having said goodbye to Kiba, Issei was now on his own. Wait a minute, the protagonist thought with a slight blush of embarrassment on his face. How do I call Tiamat if I can't use magic? Issei would position his hand on his chin as he thought with great fervor. I know. He stated aloud as he snapped his fingers. Issei tightly closed his eyes as his mind visualized something. The image of the girl from the ring appeared in Issei's mind, causing him to give a small scream in great fear as he covered his face. I'll never be able to top that movie, he thought with a big sigh at the end. Is something wrong? Issei smiled as he saw that his plan had worked, the small magic circle that appeared in his ear, and Tiamat's cute voice heard on the other side was proof of that. I felt for a second you were completely terrified. Just imagine something that scares me. It's the only method I could think of to be able to communicate with you. Issei explained as he rubbed his hair nervously. Do you need something? I would like you to teleport me there. I need help with training. Really? But you left a few hours ago, though the sentence sounded as if it was a rebuke. Tiamat's tone was clearly excited. Well, it's not just any training. I'll explain everything when I'm there. Alright. The dragoness replied, causing a light blue magic circle to appear at Issei's feet, which soon disappeared in a flash. Line jump. So your dear mistress is on the ropes, eh? Tiamat stated seriously as she played with her hair after listening to Issei's entire explanation. The young man nodded. That's exactly why I'm here. With yesterday, it was clear to me that you have a high level and that you could help me improve quickly. That way, I will do my duty to the president. Issei couldn't help but tense up a little as he watched Tiamat study him with her gaze minutely. Agreed. Tiamat got a big smile in response to his words. But you will not succeed in winning with only the conviction of doing the favor you owe your mistress and the feeling of keeping all your friends safe. Issei looked at her with great intrigue at her words. Do you know why I say that? Issei merely shook his head at the lack of an answer. Tiamat folded her arms, giving him a piercing look. You think that's funny? Huh? Issei didn't know how to respond to the poorly phrased question. Do you think it's fun to fight if your goal is to repay your mistress and protect your loved ones? Well, I don't know if I'd call it fun, but as long as I have those goals, I'm sure every fight will be fun. Issei exclaimed with great determination in his words. So, what will you do when it's no longer fun? Issei was a little surprised by Tiamat's question, but quickly answered her with a smile. I'll make it fun. Will it be fun even though you fail to complete either of your two ambitions? Issei was surprised by Tiamat's curt question, which didn't allow him to come up with a coherent answer. Even though those ambitions make your excitement for combat incredible, if you fail once, you will be lost forever. All because you failed to fulfill your mistress's favor and also failed to protect your loved ones, as the same woman will be condemned for an arranged marriage, not to mention what might happen to your demon friends. After that, would you still find some kind of excitement to keep training? Will you still find fighting fun? Issei lowered his head, not knowing what to answer him. So far, he hadn't considered the option of losing and had never really thought about how it might affect him if it ever happened. Don't worry. Issei was a little surprised by Tiamat's words. Though I have only tasted your strength for a day, I am sure you have a feeling you have yet to discover, a feeling I know all too well. If you had faced Rainer without the desire for vengeance gnawing at your conscience, then you would have discovered it then and there. Tiamat changed her serious expression to a small, somewhat imposing smile. Now, you only train to take down strong opponents who will go after your loved ones. Tiamat widened her eyes slightly with a glint of excitement in them. Only when you face them, see the full fruits of your training, and end up taking the victory. Only with that single moment. Only when that moment comes. If you find that moment. Tiamat pointed out, causing a great shiver to run through Issei's body. You will be completely fascinated by the true meaning of combat. 300. Issei would exclaim with great exhaustion, sprawling on the floor after completing the push-ups. Tiamat was at his side, watching with great attention that he performed all the exercises correctly. By tomorrow, the amount will increase by 25. And so on and so forth until the rating game arrives. Issei looked up in horror. Are you kidding me? Do I look like I'm joking? Issei swallowed hard when he saw Tiamat's completely serious expression. But I've never done so many reps in a single day before. Couldn't that affect my health? Asked Issei as comical tears streamed down his face, adding to the trembling of his entire body. No. Tiamat replied dryly, causing Issei to duck his head in defeat. Remember that you are no longer human. It's practically impossible for your muscles to tear from doing such simple exercises. The only thing that will bother you will be the intense and overwhelming fatigue you will feel on all days. I don't know if I really wanted to hear that answer, Issei replied as a depressive aura came out around him. Tiamat raised an eyebrow at this. Then why ask? Tiamat just shook her head. Whatever. Now, I'd like to have a little confrontation with you, though I'll give you a head start. Tiamat placed his hands in his pockets. I won't attack. If you won't attack me, what's the use then? Issei began to get up with great difficulty. It would be in vain to hurt you. The idea is for you to improve your speed and reaction. With your muscles so fatigued, it's the perfect time to do it. Tiamat replied, resisting the urge to laugh at Issei's condition. Understand. Issei stood upright, though his body would be shaking with great intensity. He could practically feel his muscles screaming at him to stop straining. A few seconds passed, causing Tiamat to look at him strangely as she saw him do nothing. You know you can start now, right? Issei just nodded awkwardly as his face turned purple. I know. But I can't move. Tiamat just gave a small sigh and looked up at the sky. We'll have to shorten the time of this training, or else it won't give us the time to practice magic. At least for today. It will surely come much earlier in the next few days. Tiamat watched with some amusement as Issei had just managed to take the first step. But no matter what the reason is, it's always fun and interesting to have him around. Line jump. Tiamat dodged one blow very easily, only to take the other one as if it was nothing. It didn't really hurt her at all, so she wasn't really concentrating on moving. In fact, right now, she was much more focused on watching the sunset. Let's stop this for today. After Tiamat's words, Issei practically fell to the ground from the force of gravity that felt much heavier than normal. Issei was breathing very shakily while sweating non-stop. Over 2 hours with this I felt like I was going to die. He said with a cracked voice because of his irregular breathing. Now, we will try to release your magic. Issei looked at Tiamat completely pale. Don't worry. She added quickly. Magic does not require a physical training, but a mental one. Issei breathed a sigh of relief. Saved. Tiamat would give him a small smirk. I wouldn't be so sure. Issei looked at her with confusion at her words. You need a great deal of concentration to find your magical reserves. Mental exhaustion could be just as crippling as physical exhaustion. It's even worse, as you tend to faint much more easily. Not only when you seek to master it, but also when your magical reserves are about to be depleted. Tiamat looked at him seriously, indicating that he wasn't joking. That means that if you mismanage your magic reserves, you could pass out in the middle of a fight without being able to do anything about it. Coincidentally, you have incredibly poor magic reserves, you know what I mean. Issei just nodded seriously as he struggled to his feet. If that's the case, then isn't it better not to use my magic? A mysterious gleam flashed across Tiamat's eyes, along with her equally intriguing little smile. I never said that. Even if your magic reserves are poor, it doesn't mean you can't create good magical attacks. In fact, when you learn how to release your magic reserves, I'd like to teach you a good attack. Before Issei could ask which attack it was, a voice interrupted them. Excuse me, may I say something, Tiamat? It's really important. Drake's voice echoed from the gauntlet, causing Issei to look at him with surprise and Tiamat with seriousness. The dragoness merely stood in silence for a few seconds, pondering her answer. Finally she nodded, giving her permission to Drake. Enhancers not only increase your physical strength, agility, speed and endurance. They also increase your magic reserves in the period of time the enhancers are active. The problem is that your magic reserves are very low, and boosters would only be effective if they are built up non-stop. Although your training is helping you to be able to unleash more and more power without fainting, there will come a point where you will have to focus more on your sacred gear to keep evolving. Could you help him with that, Tiamat? Issei looked very carefully at Tiamat after Drake's speech. She lowered her head, placing a hand on her chin. Impossible. Issei looked at Tiamat with great astonishment at her response. May I remind you that the sacred gear were created in the last millennium and I was locked within myself during that period. Tiamat looked up with some embarrassment. In short, I have no idea how the sacred gear works. Her gaze would return to her gaze again. But thanks to you, Issei has a small percentage of our kind in his soul. I can teach him some techniques of our kind, along with the rigorous training that any supernatural being must go through if they are to become strong. I agree, Drake replied instantly. He has yet to undergo arduous training before he begins to care about the potential of his sacred gear. Therefore, we shouldn't worry about it for the time being. Was there something else you wanted, underdeveloped lizard? Asked Tiamat seriously, though the amused air around her broke that seriousness. No. After those words, Drake could be heard grumbling some bad words under his breath for a few seconds. Tiamat sat down in front of Issei, causing the brown-haired man to get a little confused. We'll start right here. Training inside the cave would be counterproductive. It's a bit noisy outside my house, so it makes the work a bit more complicated, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. It will take you a couple of days longer to awaken your magic, but you'll get more used to the mental exhaustion, and you'll know more accurately when you're close to your limit. Issei just nodded and settled in as she did. Now, close your eyes and clasp your hands together, leaving a small gap in the middle. Tiamat watched carefully as Issei followed every step. Look for the magical power within your body. Try to visualize it as much as you can between your hands. Don't get distracted at any time, or you'll have to start from scratch. After his explanation, Tiamat was completely silent, studying Issei with her eyes. And so the seconds passed. And so the minutes passed. The only noises that could be heard were those of nature. After an hour, Tiamat watched intently as a small purple dot appeared between Issei's hands. Right after that, the purple dot disappeared and Issei began to stagger sideways with great fatigue. Finally, he passed out. Tiamat led Issei full over her shoulder, then hugged him warmly. You did well for your first time, Tiamat said in a soothing voice, pulling Issei's body closer to hers, making the embrace much more passionate. Sorry to interrupt the moment, Tiamat opened her eyes with a small start. It never occurred to her that Drake shouldn't necessarily sleep when Issei did. But there's something I need to talk to you about. In private. Make it quick. Tiamat's tone was clearly displeased. When you said Issei was special, what exactly did you mean? Tiamat was a little surprised by the question. My doubts were fully confirmed when you mentioned that you had no idea about sacred gear, coupled with the fact that no one but Albion and I knew about these effects. So why did you say that Issei is special if you didn't know that demonic corruption didn't affect him? Tiamat rested her chin on Issei's head, thinking of an answer. Because he's been through things similar to mine, even worse, and yet he was able to live on without any problems. It's true that he still has after effects that I don't know if they'll ever heal, but he's not hindered by them. He goes on with his life. So, I asked myself, if he has lived through something worse and managed to overcome it, why can't I? I know that dragons feel much more than humans because they have a much bigger emotional trigger than humans do. But still, Issei served as an example for me. Even if things don't go my way, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. A small smile appeared on Tiamat's face. If you were the second chance in my life, I could say that Issei is the third. But unlike the other two, he knew how to understand and support me at all times, even though he only met me 4 days ago. And thanks to him, I also realized that I acted wrong many times. Not only for me, but also for others. Drake was visibly surprised by that last comment. Tiamat gave a small sigh. I can never forget how I felt when you rejected me, so I will never forgive you, but I realize now that I acted like a deranged madwoman these 1,000 years. I'm sorry. An awkward silence fell between the two of them for a few seconds. I do not accept your apology. Tiamat was shocked by the response. You have killed many of my bearers just because of your madness. In my case, I will never be able to forgive you either. But I am not Issei. Tiamat widened her eyes at the last words. I would like to stay as far away from you as possible, but Issei is my bearer. He's the one who decides who will be part of his circle, and from his attitude and thoughts, I'm sure you're at the top of that list right now. A small blush appeared on Tiamat's face after Drake's words. Still, that doesn't answer the question I asked you earlier. Tiamat sunk her face into Issei's neck tenderly in an attempt to cover her blush. Everyone thinks he's special just because he's the bearer of Drake. But to me, Issei is special in other ways. He made all sorts of emotions I didn't feel a millennium ago come rushing back in big holes. Happiness, joy, fun, sympathy. As far as I'm concerned, he's not special because he has a heavenly dragon. He's special because he has all those qualities I mentioned a moment ago. Tiamat would tighten her embrace a little more, making Issei smile in his sleep. He is my dragon of light. Drake was completely shocked by her last words. Light dragon, it's an ambiguous term that was used when dragons were in their heyday, Drake thought with great surprise. This term referred to dragons that descended from the sun to bring peace to the broken hearts of other dragons. Obviously, these are just stories. Drake widened his eyes beyond belief. But for her to say that. So, are you telling me that he's special to you because he manages to make you feel great? Tiamat further covered her face in Issei's neck, covering her growing blush. That's how it is. Was Tiamat's simple answer, leaving Drake dubious. Why do I feel this way? He thought the dragon, because of how her heart was beating more and more passionately, adding to the fact that the myriad of beautiful emotions were churning the pit of her stomach. I'm just saying how he makes me feel. Is there something weird about that? Okay, I get your point, Drake said seriously, ending the conversation. I don't think she feels anything more for my partner. If so, she'd be acting crazy, just like before. Drake was silent for a few seconds, only to frown completely. Although. He made me see that I did wrong many times. I'm sorry. Tiamat's words struck Drake's mind again. She's definitely not the same as before. And all of that is thanks to Issei. The dragon thought seriously. Besides, they're always so close, it's really weird. Finally, Drake shrugged with a bored look on his face. I guess time will tell. Line jump. After several minutes, Issei finally woke up with a huge headache. Quickly, he tried to put a hand to his head to ease the pain. As he raised his hand, he was suddenly impeded by Tiamat's head, which was resting on his shoulder. Seeing this, a small pained smile broke out on Issei's face, causing him to switch targets. The brown-haired man placed his hand on top of Tiamat's head and caressed it affectionately. This reminds me of when I woke up in the morning, Issei thought as she watched as Tiamat slept peacefully, sitting on top of his legs. I always saw dragons as a fearsome, imposing and terrifying being. But, it never crossed my mind that they could also be beautiful. Tiamat was woken up by Issei's voice. Wake up already? Issei asked with a smile, as he continued stroking her hair. Obviously, he hadn't realized that the last words he had said were out loud. Tiamat was only looking at him penetratingly for a few seconds, making Issei a little nervous. I said something wrong? Issei wondered out loud. Tiamat quickly denied. Not at all. I was just thinking that you did a good job today. she clarified, getting up and holding out her hand for Issei to get him up. "Thank you," Issei exclaimed with a toothy smile on her face. He glanced at the clock suddenly and his eyes widened. "Shit. I have to go back now or they'll kill me." Tiamat lowered her head a bit, causing Issei to look at her in confusion. "Can't you stay?" Issei was surprised by Tiamat's sudden question. Issei placed a hand on Tiamat's shoulder comfortingly, making the dragon look into his eyes. "I'm sorry but I cannot," he responded pitifully. "But don't worry. We'll see each other first thing tomorrow morning." Tiamat's typical expression changed to a small smile. "Okay." She positioned her hand on top of Issei's comforting grip before creating the magic circle. Finally, Issei disappeared with a huge toothy grin, leaving Tiamat all alone. The woman stayed for a couple of seconds touching her shoulder to then look inside her cave. Her home was completely empty and dark, as it always was. But those 4 days. Those 4 days were really exciting. And for some reason, what she liked the most in those 4 days was the night. Specifically, sleeping with Issei at night. Unfortunately, tonight and the ones that follow cannot be like that. And that was something that bothered him a lot. Tiamat hugged herself. "Why is your body so warm and comfortable?" She wondered herself, raising an eyebrow in the process. She started to enter the cave slowly. With each passing second, her face was getting more and more flushed. "Am I really beautiful?" Tiamat thought as she remembered Issei's words. Line jump. "It's taking time." Riaz gave a tired sigh seeing that Issei was the only one who hadn't arrived. "There is still time, President," Kiba declared, looking at the clock that indicated how long it was until 10:30. "If he doesn't arrive in 5 minutes, I'll kill him," Kaneko commented, looking at the food on the table with great appetite. Everyone heard the noise of the door, causing them to turn their heads. Everyone widened their eyes in shock. "Sorry I'm late. I fell asleep for a few minutes," Issei clarified with a smile on her face. His body was completely sweaty, as were his clothes. He was leaning against the doorframe because he could barely stand up. The first to change her surprised look was Riaz, who gave her a smile. "From what I see, I don't need to worry about your training," Issei just replied with a smile, making everyone else nod in approval, indicating that they agreed with his mistress. Line jump. "How do you feel today?" Tiamat asked with her arms crossed, watching as Issei was stretching her muscles to begin. Fine. Issei blinked in surprise as he realized that he felt no pain at all. Quickly, he began to touch every muscle in his body in great surprise. "Actually, too good. It's like I didn't do anything yesterday." "You see it?" Issei looked at Tiamat with intrigue. "That's one of the many differences between a human body and a demon body." A somewhat terrifying smile appeared on Tiamat's face, causing Issei to have a chill throughout his body. "That means we can intensify the training more and more without worrying about your health." Before Issei could rebuke, Tiamat reached out her hand just at the same time a magic circle appeared on the spot. She reached her hand into the magic circle and from it began to pull out a sword that was made entirely of ice. A large amount of cryogenic steam was emitted around her, giving her a menacing aura, though her appearance was quite normal. "To start today, I'd like you to learn how to dodge thrusts. At least the most basic ones." Tiamat threw the sword and caught it multiple times. "To be honest, I'm not good with swords. But at least it will help you a little." Issei just swallowed nervously when Tiamat looked at him with an imposing shine in his eyes. "I know you do all this to help me. But your workouts are brutal," Issei thought, breaking into a cold sweat as Tiamat slowly approached him. Line jump. Issei dodged a downward thrust with great difficulty, leaping back. He could see how the edge of the sword grazed his nose, practically freezing his nostrils. "What the hell is up with that sword? It barely grazed me," Issei thought with his eyes widening as he couldn't see how a simple touch had frozen almost all of his nose. "I don't have time to think about it." He tried to stop panting from exhaustion while he dried his face. His legs were shaking like jelly. "It's been 3 hours without a break. It moves so fast that if I react a thousandth late, I feel like I could snap in two." Issei tensed as Tiamat put her right foot in front, charging a sword attack from him. A second later, Issei lost sight of her for a moment, causing a small blizzard to kick up Tiamat's previous position. Issei gritted his teeth when the dragon appeared in front of him practically out of nowhere, as she had been doing for these 3 hours. Issei felt a strong tug on both of his legs. "Shit. My legs aren't responding." Issei closed his eyes tightly when he saw how the sword was going to cut off his head. Just when he was an inch from his neck, the attack stopped suddenly, creating a small blizzard that nearly knocked Issei to the ground. The brunette opened one of his eyes in confusion as he noticed that his head was still attached to his body. "I guess that's your limit." Issei felt how Tiamat placed his hand delicately on his nose, healing the wound and thawing it. "Tomorrow I'll go a little faster." He cleared the dragon, pulling away as he began to play with his sword, flinging it and catching it with one finger. Before you take a break, I'd like you to do one more thing. Issei looked at her with special attention. I would like you to do 3 thrusts with my sword. She stopped playing, taking it by the handle and looking at him with her typical seriousness. 3 thrusts? Issei wondered out loud. Well, at least it's something simple. Issei shrugged with a smile. Tiamat only smirked at her words. So Tiamat threw the sword at Issei's feet, causing the brown-haired man to yell in surprise when a crater was created by the weight of the sword. Let it be 4 instead of 3. Issei stood up with a bit of difficulty and looked at the crater where he was standing with his eyes rolling. I should have imagined it. Line jump. Leave it for today. Tiamat ordered, arriving with some fruits to eat. Issei released the sword as delicately as possible so he wouldn't create another crater on the spot. Damn, he said with great exhaustion. I could barely lift it twice. I didn't expect you to make it the first time. Tiamat answered, sitting down in front of Issei to share the food. The protagonist just rolled his eyes at his comment. Then we will do the same as yesterday, but adding 25 to each exercise. She stated matter-of-factly, eating her fruit calmly. Also with the legs? Issei asked nervously. They still haven't fully recovered. Tiamat only nodded. When I say everyone, it's everyone. The dragoness gave him a somewhat imposing look, causing Issei to freak out a bit. Finally, her gaze softened and she gave a small sigh. I know I'm too hard on you. But I'm only hard because I want to make sure you get strong. Tiamat looked down with some sadness. I don't want to have to worry when you're not with me. She looked up from her suddenly, a tender look on her face. I'm not saying you should spend all your time with me. She quickly added. The problem is your position. You are the wielder of the Welsh dragon, and I am sure you will run into many powerful enemies. Tiamat's eyes widened a bit as Issei beamed at her and grabbed her free hand lovingly. I understand perfectly. You don't need to explain it to me. Issei squeezed Tiamat's hand a bit, causing a small discharge of emotions to hit the dragon's chest. Omitting all of the above. It's nice to know that there is someone who cares so much for me. Tiamat got a little carried away by her emotions, giving Issei a sweet smile. She returned his handshake, showing how fond she was of him. Time skip. 9 days had passed. Issei spent almost all of his time with Tiamat, although they only focused on training, so they rarely struck up a conversation. There were a few days when Issei couldn't finish certain exercises, but considering the constant sum of numbers in his repetitions, it was somewhat understandable. On the last day, Issei had managed to perform 4 thrusts with the ice sword, and he also managed to perform all the exercises successfully after 2 days without being able to finish them. Considering that 11 days ago he started with 300 of each, it's quite an achievement that he can complete 550 in just a few days. Regarding his magical power, he hadn't managed to get too far. Now, the 12th day of training began. Therefore, there were 2 days left for the raiding game. Issei had completed the first series of trainings, so he was already on the small break from him, eating something along with Tiamat. Whew. Issei gave a big snort, patting his stomach. It's impressive that simple fruits can be so delicious. Tiamat just nodded, agreeing. Which exercise will you start with when your break is over? The dragoness asked, opening her mouth wide to take a bite of the fruit, denoting her cute little fangs. Issei put a hand to his chin as he thought carefully. Mai was planning to start with some squats. Whoa. Their conversation was interrupted when they saw how the dragons they had met before were approaching them. How long, friend? Issei replied, giving the smaller dragon a small smile. The little dragon just nodded with a smile. Waver, bye, var. She says that she comes to fulfill her promise. She wants to play with you. Tiamat served as translator while he continued to eat without paying much attention. Where? The little dragon touched Issei's face with her paw, making Issei look at her confused. You're stained. To play, you must remove the stain by staining another person who has not passed it on to you. Tiamat translated simply. Issei quickly fixed her gaze on the dragon pope, causing him to jump a little at her gaze. The brown-haired man made a quick leap towards him, which was dodged without much trouble by the dragon. Issei smiled defiantly, seeing that he was faster than he thought at first. At this time, Tiamat found the game interesting. More than anything, because of Issei's look. Remember that in an hour you must resume your training. Issei just nodded, without taking his eyes off the dragon, who was starting to feel a little nervous because of his intensity. Issei made another sudden jump again, being dodged again by the dragon. In less than a second, they began a huge chase around the entire cave and a part of the forest. I guess you didn't need the rest. Tiamat thought with an amused smile on his face, seeing how Issei tried to reach the dragon without success. The other 2 dragons were laughing at their interaction. Line jump. Tiamat's eyes sparkled with excitement as she saw that a small purple orb had spawned in Issei's hand. Issei opened his eyes when he felt something strange between her hands, giving a cry of surprise when she saw the small orb. Suddenly, most of his breath disappeared as he felt a great deal of his energy drain away. Tiamat quickly grabbed his shoulders. That's almost all your magical reserves. Try putting half of it back inside you to take that feeling away. Tiamat stated calmly. Issei just nodded, closing his eyes again with great concentration. After that, the small 6-centimeter orb became a 3-centimeter one, causing Issei to snap his eyes open when he felt the energy return to his body. So this is magic, said Issei with great seriousness in his gaze. Tiamat watched him closely. Aren't you happy? After 12 days, you can finally wake her up. Issei looked down in disappointment. I don't know, it's really small. I doubt I could do anything interesting with it. Don't worry. Issei looked up from him in a bit of surprise, seeing Tiamat smile. Tomorrow I would like to teach you a deadly technique that requires very little magic power. With your current magic, you would be able to throw one of them. Tiamat narrowed her eyes boldly. But with your buffs, you'd be able to get through 5 or 6 without feeling mentally exhausted. Issei could feel how a small chill ran through his entire body. Not only because of the new technique that he would learn, but also because of the fact that he would use his sacred gear. That's right, Issei hadn't used his sacred gear at any time during his training, so he had no idea how many augmentations he could perform right now. I can't wait until tomorrow, he thought with a flash of excitement in his eyes. Line jump. Activate your sacred gear. Issei just nodded. A small flash of red encircled his arm, revealing the gauntlet. Issei looked closely at Tiamat, waiting for the next instructions. Release all augments. Boost. The word echoed through the gauntlet for 2 long minutes, with a slightly slow continuity. Finally, the counter stopped when it reached 35. 15 more than last time. Tiamat nodded to herself. It's pretty good. Issei nodded in agreement and amazement. In her first month she had managed to improve her limit by 20. But now, she barely spent 12 days training with Tiamat and the limit had almost doubled. Listen and observe carefully. Tiamat raised one of her arms with her open palm, pointing to a mountain in the distance. Aim towards your target with the hand that you will launch the attack. After that, concentrate a small amount of magic in the palm of your hand. But think that you will fight a dragon attack. The underdeveloped lizard will do the rest of the work. Issei just nodded and imitated Tiamat's movements. After a second, a small red orb appeared in her hand, emitting a small sonic sound that was almost inaudible. Issei looked at the orb with some disappointment. That amount is fine. Issei was shocked by Tiamat's words. I don't think you need more magical power to finish off your next opponents. Remember that your reserves are very limited. Issei looked at the small red orb again suspiciously. But. Trust me. Issei observed the small smile that Tiamat was giving him, causing her doubts to dissipate almost instantly. Now let it go. Issei looked at the mountain that lay in front of him and took a deep breath, easing her thoughts to release the attack. Really, she didn't expect him to do too much. Dragon shot. Braig's voice echoed through the place, being followed by the small orb that transformed into a huge and strong lightning that was fired against the mountain, completely destroying its top. Issei could only close and open his mouth at what she had just witnessed. He couldn't find the words. Tiamat deigned to watch silently with great amusement as he was acting. I told you it would be a good attack. Can I do 5 more attacks? Issei finally spoke, with little stars in his eyes. Tiamat crossed her arms and nodded. Though, with just one of those attacks you would be able to defeat a mid-class devil without much difficulty. You just have to make sure you hit it. Issei looked at the gauntlet with great admiration. Tomorrow will be the last day of training, so I would like to change the routine just for that day. Issei watched Tiamat with bated breath. What will we do? Tiamat placed both hands on her hips, giving him a commanding smile. We will have a match. One-on-one. You will use your sacred gear and do your best to defeat me, as if I were your enemy. Issei gritted his teeth a bit at the statement. He didn't have a good experience fighting her. Your power may have increased considerably. But if you don't test it once during a match prior to the rating game, it won't do much good. Issei just looked at her seriously, without saying a word. Even though every fiber of her body was screaming that she was going to suffer a lot, something inside of him was making him emotional. He didn't know what that something was, but he liked it. Line jump. Tiamat was dodging all the punches and kicks with great ease and technique. Damn, I can't get a hit. Issei thought, gritting his teeth in anger. In one of the many blows that he tried to hit her, Tiamat ducked to avoid a punch that grazed his light blue hair. Not a second later, Tiamat had plunged her fist into Issei's stomach, causing the protagonist to vomit a little blood, adding to the fact that he was thrown backwards by the blow. Since they were fighting outside, this time there was no wall to stop him from sliding, so he only stopped a couple of meters behind. Issei was breathing heavily as he wiped the blood from his mouth. After these 6 hours without her moving a muscle, she has given me the first blow. I can't believe that with just one blow she can do me so much damage. Issei thought with great admiration. Without a doubt, my teacher is someone really strong. Issei stopped breathing heavily, outlining a small mysterious smile on his face. With that in mind, Issei raised his gauntlet towards Tiamat, causing the dragoness to look a little surprised. I think I'll be able to use everything in one attack. The large red ball that covered the entire palm of his hand suddenly appeared, causing Tiamat to widen his eyes. Dragon shot. This time, the sonic sound and the amount of power released was 6 times higher than before, causing the ground to crack from the mere pressure exerted by the attack. The huge mass of red color was rapidly heading towards Tiamat, who was watching the attack with a much calmer look than at first. In less than 2 seconds, he was practically inches from his face. A desperate measure is never a good option. Tiamat deflected the attack into the sky with a flick of his hand, causing the attack to angle at, then vanished into the air with a huge deafening explosion that sent an incredible blizzard out of the place. Issei could only watch helplessly as Tiamat had deflected the attack without getting annoyed one bit. Finally, his physical and mental exhaustion took over completely, and he fell unconscious. Tiamat approached him with a worried look on his face. It was too sudden a move. Drake spoke, causing Tiamat to look down at the now non-existent gauntlet. I didn't have time to tell him it was a bad idea. Tiamat closed her eyes seriously. It was my fault I didn't tell him that a sudden large drain on magic reserves can make you pass out for a few minutes or render you completely immobile for a few seconds. Tiamat loaded Issei on her back to take him to the cave. Can I ask you a question? Tiamat remained silent as he walked into the cave, giving her consent. Do you think he can win against Razor? Tiamat stopped short after hearing the question, lowering her head in serious thought. I don't believe it. Tiamat answered, closing her eyes in regret. Although he has become very strong in 2 weeks, I think he needs more time to face a demon that belongs to the high class. His physical strength, stamina, and speed are far below what is recommended for this class of matchups, and I don't think he can just beat him using his dragon shot. His enemy would have to be very stupid to take the hit, since it's not that hard to dodge when the attack is so weak, since the shot is too thin and takes a few seconds to hit, depending on the distance. To be honest, I think the same thing. I'm worried about him. Tiamat looked up at the sky with a glint of concern in his eyes. I don't care if he loses or not, since in this case, the result is irrelevant when it comes to his safety. What worries me is how much that defeat could affect him. Braid gave a great tired sigh, understanding what Tiamat meant. You only have this chance to return the favor to the bratty demon. The lights in the gym came on, causing Issei to startle a little, while Kaneko seemed unsurprised. Come out, Grimoires. We know you're here. The command from the female voice made Issei and Kaneko come out from their hiding place, seeing how 4 girls were waiting for them. Issei just looked at them with some surprise, not knowing what exactly to say. 3 are pawns. The one in front is a rook. Kaneko's simple cold comment made Issei glare at her. Issei bumped her fists with a defiant smile on her face. In that case, leave the rook to me and you take care of the pawns, Kaneko. Kaneko looked at him with an expression that said, are you an idiot? Causing Issei to look at her in confusion. You don't have much combat experience, so I don't think you'll be able to withstand the blows well, and we're talking about a rook. Basically, your forte is stamina and/or physical strength. Issei blinked in confusion, not understanding why Kaneko didn't want him to fight her. I already know that very well, that's exactly why I want to fight her. Kaneko continued to look at him like he was an idiot, making Issei start to get nervous. How much longer do you intend to keep talking? The woman in front asked, with a hint of irritation in her words. Issei and Kaneko looked at her with some surprise. If you guys don't come to us, the woman gave them a slightly creepy smile. Then we will come to you. The 4 women rushed towards the stage at top speed. Kaneko got into a defensive stance when she saw the 3 pawns rushing against her. No, Kaneko thought, knowing that the rook's target was Issei. Issei gritted her teeth as the woman began to raise her staff to deliver a heavy blow. The chestnut prepared to defend himself. He prepared. And braced himself. How slow, Issei thought with widened eyes as he activated the gauntlet to block and grab the staff with almost no difficulty, then lured her towards him and delivered a hard blow to her abdomen that separated her feet from the ground. The woman's eyes widened in surprise, spitting out a large amount of blood. Issei took a step back, surprised at himself as he watched the woman writhe on her knees in pain. Kaneko and the other 3 women looked on in shock. At what point did she acquire such strength and reflexes? Thought the Nekomata in genuine amazement. The woman looked at him with great pent-up rage as she struggled up from the ground with great difficulty. Tiamat was much faster and stronger, Issei thought as a small smile began to form on his face. Boost. The woman lashed out at Issei again with her staff without paying attention to the speaking voice. With the newfound strength, Issei deflected the attack with all her might using the gauntlet, sending the woman's staff flying away as it couldn't withstand such force exerted against it. It didn't take more than a second for her to be surprised by the fact that her weapon went flying, as Issei gave her a strong punch in the face that deformed her face a little, and then gave her a strong kick in the chest that sent her flying against the other side of the gymnasium. When she hit the wall, she kicked up some dust and spat spit, falling to the floor with a thud and falling completely unconscious. By now, the three razor pawns were staring at Issei with some terror, feeling a cold sweat break out all over their faces. Kaneko didn't waste a distraction and proceeded to deliver a heavy blow to the neck of one of the girls, which was heard as a loud pop. The two remaining women turned to look at Kaneko, gritting their teeth tightly. Issei isn't the only one who hits hard, were Kaneko's simple words, giving the two girls an expressionless look. Rook, Shui, Pawn, Kira of House Razor have been defeated. Issei watched with some surprise as the two downed girls disappeared from the gym via green light. Issei, go. Kaneko's simple words caused Issei to glare at her. I'll take them both. He nodded without complaint, rushing out of the place, while multiple boost could be heard due to his emotions being somewhat run wild for obvious reasons. After Issei exited the building, he took a couple of steps until he saw a large light project over his head. Knowing that indicated trouble, the Brown quickly defended his head with the gauntlet while another boost was heard in the process. The magical attack hit his gauntlet with great force, sinking his feet into the ground a little. Issei gritted his teeth in surprise when he saw that the fire attack was cracking his gauntlet. Finally, the attack stopped as the gauntlet shattered into 1,000 pieces, resetting Issei's hit count, causing him to fall to the ground from the sudden loss of strength. Oh? You managed to withstand my attack. That's pretty incredible stuff for a low-class demon. The wavy purple-haired woman spoke, looking at Issei with a bit of surprise. The young man wasted no time and leapt to his feet, activating his gauntlet again. This time, the boost ran even faster than the previous time, due to the somewhat desperate feeling that emerged from him because of that woman. She's not like the others. I'd better be very careful, or one of those attacks could really hurt me. He thought, gritting his teeth tightly as he reached his 10th boost with great speed. The woman hummed to herself. In that case, a considerably larger fireball appeared on her staff. I'll use a slightly stronger attack. The woman's eyes widened in a sinister manner, causing Issei to quickly get on guard. Not a good option to block it. Issei thought sharply, preparing to pounce when she launched the attack. Just as she pointed the staff in his direction, a large electric yellow magic circle appeared in the green sky, causing the woman to widen her eyes in shock and change the direction of the attack at the last second, sending it skyward. A huge bolt of lightning descended from the magic circle in the direction of the woman, which slammed hard into the large firebomb, causing both attacks to cancel each other out in a nice explosion. Fufu. Issei recognized that voice instantly, causing a huge grin to break out on his face as a familiar figure appeared flying in front of him. Akeno. I think it's time for me to have some fun, commented the aforementioned, licking her finger in a sadistic and lewd manner. Issei, quickly go where Kiba is. Issei grabbed his ear at the sound of Ria's voice. He recently locked 3 razor pawns in the trap, but the circle of containment was too obvious. It's more than certain they'll head in his direction and break through the barrier or wait for him outside for an ambush. Issei just nodded seriously and ran off towards Kiba's position, leaving Akeno and Kaneko alone. Blind jump. 2 razor pawns have been eliminated. Issei looked up with some surprise. That means Kaneko made it. The chestnut thought with a smile. Those thoughts were interrupted when he bumped into someone. Oh, it's you. Issei declared with a grin when he saw that it was Kiba. Where are the enemies? His smile was replaced with seriousness after that question. Kiba pointed behind his back. I already took care of them. Issei looked behind him to see how 3 women were lying on the ground, disappearing in a flash after a second. That's impressive. Issei exclaimed with a smile, then looked at the trees seriously. But this isn't over yet. Get out of there, we already know you're here. After a few seconds, a large curtain of dust rose on the sight, revealing a brown woman who had a pair of bandages in her hair. I am Razor's horse, and by my loyalty to him I swear I will crush you. Though her words were threatening, her innocent tone took away from her seriousness. Kiba took a couple of steps forward, pointing his sword at the woman. I'll take care of her, Issei. The aforementioned merely nodded. Issei stood behind Kiba, watching his movements. It's all different now, Issei thought, blinking in surprise. Before, Kiba's movement seemed pretty fast to me. He said to himself, watching the sparks fly every time Kiba clashed swords with his opponent. Now he's not slow, but not fast either. It's normal. Issei looked down at his gauntlet as he heard another surge. Maybe it's due to the augmentations and training. He wondered, surprised at himself. They're outnumbered. Issei watched as a woman smaller than him appeared, bearing a rather large resemblance to Razor. We'll crush you first, and then we'll take care of the night. Who are you? Issei pointed at her brazenly. My name is Ravel Phoenix. I am Razor's younger sister and his bishop. The woman replied in a fine and proud manner, denoting her noble background. After Ravel introduced herself, Razor's remaining pieces surrounded him, causing Kiba to glance back with a frown. Issei, on the other hand, was thinking of other things. Wait a minute. Issei placed his hand on his chin as he thought carefully. All of Razor's pieces are women, so he must be some sort of harem king, and he has his younger sister among those women. Issei stood completely still, causing all the women to look at him strangely. Slowly, his face began to turn violet. Your brother is sick. Issei pointed indiscriminately at him, making Ravel blush to understand what he was referring to. We must maintain the purity of our species. Ravel shouted, making Issei look at her as if she were insane. Ravel quickly regained her composure. Whatever. A low-class demon should not and cannot meddle in matters that do not concern him. Especially, if he is a reincarnated demon who understands nothing about our kind. Finally, the chestnut decided to forget everything that had just happened, or else he would be distracted from the fight. Isabella, finish him off. The blonde ordered, causing a chestnut woman with half of her face covered by a metal mask to step forward. I am Lord Razor's rook. By my loyalty to him, I swear that. Yes, yes, yes. Issei waved his hand in boredom, making the women a little angry. I'm getting tired of your ridiculous presentations. Issei's eyes would flash, raising his gauntlet against the woman as he pointed at her. Let us begin at once. The woman gritted her teeth. You will pay for your insolence. She lunged at Issei. The protagonist waited for her until the last second, feeling he had all the time in the world to dodge her. But it was not in his plans to do so. The woman tried to punch Issei in the face, but Issei stopped her in her tracks in one swift movement, using his left hand. That is, the one without the gauntlet. With his bare hand. Shouted Ravel with great surprise. I don't keep track of how many augmentations I go. But it must be more than 20. So my strength, stamina and speed must be more than double when the first battle began. Issei clenched his gauntlet tightly, making a menacing metallic noise. The chestnut watched this in terror and tried to quickly wriggle out of his grip to no avail, as Issei had a pretty good hold on her. She's a bit stronger than the last one, so 2 hits should do it. Issei punched her hard in the abdomen, causing the woman's eyes to widen as wide as they could go. Issei's entire fist sank into her stomach, forcing her to vomit up a large amount of blood, staining Issei's face a bit in the process. The heavy blow generated a small blizzard around her, causing everyone, even Kiba, to look on in shock. Just as Issei prepared to strike the second blow, the woman collapsed in her grip, causing the brown-haired man to look at her in disbelief. A second later, the woman disappeared in a flash of green. Issei looked down at his gauntlet in shock. Silence had been palpable on the Phoenix side. In one fell swoop, Ravel thought, rather alarmed. There is no other choice. The blonde shouted, causing them all to glare at her. Let's all attack together. The women quickly nodded and rushed at Issei, while Ravel and the other bishop hung back, preparing magical attacks. Issei watched as the women quickly ran towards him, with absolute coordination. Even so, they were still slow. Issei ducked his head to dodge a blow, then swung his body to the side to dodge another one that went for his chest, then leaned to the other side to dodge another blow that went in the opposite direction, and finally finished with a great leap, dodging all the women and causing them to slam into each other. Issei spread his wings so that he could fly, watching from above with some grace. Your coordination is really good. But it's no use if your opponent is much stronger than you. That's what Tiamat explained to me, and I see she was quite right. 2 considerably large magical attacks impacted against Issei's back without him being able to defend himself. We got him. Ravel exclaimed with a huge grin on her face as she watched the dust cloud begin to dissipate. Both women widened their eyes in shock when they saw that Issei's shirt was torn, but he only had small scratches all along his back. Damn, I let my guard down. Thought the young man with a frown as he felt pinpricks along the entire length of his back. Her face slowly turned purple. If Tiamat had seen this, she would have surely increased my training hours. Even more. Issei tried to look at his back, seeing that it was no big deal. Good thing the power-ups are already taking effect, or else that attack would have been devastating. He thought seriously. The tower and the queen of the house of Rias have been eliminated. Both Kiba and Issei widened their eyes in shock at what they heard. Issei clenched his fists tightly as he watched as all the gathered women were studying him warily with their eyes. The protagonist gave Kiba a quick glance, causing him to nod as he continued his fight, though the other woman was already visibly exhausted. Issei tilted his gauntlet towards them, causing them all to visibly twitch. A small red orb generated at the tip of his gauntlet, causing the women to look at each other in confusion. Dragon shot. The small orb transformed into a large red bolt of lightning that shot out at the women, causing their eyes to widen in palpable disbelief. Still, Issei was a bit far away, so it gave them enough time to dodge it. Kiba saw this and quickly separated his opponent from him with a loud clash of swords that sent her flying, then created another sword and thrust it into her stomach with one throw. The blonde wasted no time and buried his sword in the ground, causing a large number of blades to start flying out of the ground at a considerable height. The women turned to escape, but they were all caught and cut by the swords that came out of nowhere, falling to the ground. They all opened their eyes in horror as the sonic attack was already inches away from their faces. A huge explosion echoed through the scene, causing everyone to take cover from the massive amount of debris the attack produced. A complete curtain covered the battlefield, making it impossible to see where the attacks were coming from. The two bishops stood together back to back, waiting for an attack. A quick flash crossed in front of one of the bishops, widening her eyes in surprise, only to have a large stream of blood spurt out all over her torso, courtesy of Kiba. The dust began to dissipate, making Ravel able to see Kiba. "Now, who's outnumbered?" Kiba asked with a condescending smirk, making the blonde even angrier. Issei clenched his right fist with a big victorious smile on his face. Issei's eyes flickered in shock as he could see a huge fireball instantly impact Kiba, causing a huge scream to be heard along with a huge explosion. Kiba was thrown out of the dust by the sheer magnitude of the explosion, having bruises and burns all over his body, plus his shirt and half of his trousers had been completely destroyed. Kiba rolled a couple of meters on the ground until he finally fell completely unconscious, causing a green glow to cover him and disappear from the scene. "Ravel, go with Razor. He's taking on the Gremory brat." Issei raised his gaze, gritting his teeth tightly at the sight of Razor's queen. "I'll take care of this kid." Ravel nodded. "Thank you, Ubeluna." She took off running towards the direction of the rooftops. "Wait." Issei would yell, starting to fly in his direction. He slammed on the brakes as another, smaller fireball passed within an inch of his face. "I am your rival, boy," Ubeluna declared with a mischievous grin on her face. Issei took some distance, gritting his teeth tightly. "I must end this quickly." Issei tilted his gauntlet towards Ubeluna. "With a normal one I won't make it through their attack. You must be careful with the amount of magic power you use. If you use a large amount of magic reserves all at once, you will cause your mind to overload. As if you go into an uncontrollable dizzy spell, and you might even faint, like what happened to you just now." Issei recalled Tiamat's words, causing a small smile to appear on his face. In that case Issei gave a large sigh as the small orb grew twice as large. "It'll be 20%. Ubeluna just watched the attack with a small smug smile on her face. "Really, you think that'll rival my firebomb?" The queen pointed her staff at him, creating a huge fireball. "You've got to be kidding me." The woman threw the attack, with the idea of completely crushing Issei. Dragon shot. Her eyes widened in shock as the small orb transformed into a large attack. Both magical powers collided in the middle, fighting for power for a short second as the dragon shot overtook it with great ease. When Ubeluna thought to dodge the attack, it was already in front of her. Arg. A great scream was heard at the same time as the explosion hit, causing Issei to cover his eyes a bit from the huge blizzard that the attack raised. Ubeluna stepped out of the curtain of dust, plummeting down with her clothes almost completely shredded. A small blush shot across Issei's face at the sight of her beep, but she quickly regained her composure as she knew why she was here. Issei slapped his cheeks hard. This is not the time to be thinking about beep. He took off in the direction of the school's rooftop, seeing some explosions could be seen from the distance. Blind jump. "It's a shame it must end this way, Riaz, my love." Razor commented, preparing a massive fire attack that looked like a tiny sun for its eyes. Riaz had her clothes somewhat shredded, causing one of her beak to be exposed, showing that they had been fighting for a while now. What can we do against his regeneration?" Riaz thought in despair, gritting his teeth tightly. He didn't have much time to think of an idea as the large fireball headed in his direction. Although the attack was really big, its speed was completely abnormal, so it was already only a meter away from the two women. Issei stepped right in the middle of the attack, stopping the huge fireball in its tracks with his gauntlet. The chestnut clenched his teeth tightly as he felt the heat and force of the attack, pushing him to his limit very quickly. The attack began to drag him down, causing him to widen his eyes beyond belief. Boost. 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 Bestuo. That last surge indicated that he had reached his limit. Although he had managed to stop the attack's advance, his gauntlet was beginning to crack, causing him to become visibly worried. "Promise to tower." He shouted with elation, causing the tower symbol to appear on his body in a red magic circle. The gauntlet instantly stopped cracking. But even so, it still wasn't enough. Issei clenched his teeth tightly in great pain as he rested his bare hand on the attack. He took a step forward, causing the massive fireball to begin to recoil. Razor said to himself, quite impressed by what he was seeing. The great glint flashed across Issei's eyes as he raised his gaze. Ooh, I. The large fireball shot up into the sky after Issei's shout, causing it to crash into the barrier and generate a huge explosion. Issei fell to his knees, breathing heavily as he grabbed his burned arm in considerable pain. They easily became second-degree burns. Asia quickly rushed to his aid, beginning to heal him. Good job. The nun commented, causing Issei to give her a pained smile. Issei, are you alright? She asked Riaz, approaching him. Issei was unable to answer, as Razor's leisurely clapping drew everyone's attention. Impressive, I would never have thought a low-class reincarnated demon could stop my best attack. Razor exclaimed, a beefy grin on his face. You've got some pretty interesting pieces, Riaz. Razor narrowed his eyes with a dangerous glint in them. Don't you think it would be really bad if something happened to them? Riaz just glared at him with great hatred, causing Razor to shake his head in disappointment. First, you dared to interfere in the most important matters of maintaining purity in the demons, adding the factor of wanting to damage a great pact between two families belonging to the 72 pillars for your own well-being. And now, you are willing to throw away such valuable pieces for reproach, knowing that your defeat is imminent. Razor bowed his shoulders, a smile on his face. You are a hopelessly spoiled brat. Razor gave him a lustful look, making Riaz feel disgusted. But I'll take care of controlling you when you're my wife. How can you say that, you peeper? Issei shouted, rising from the spot, now fully healed. The president should be able to marry whoever she wants, and for that very reason she acts that way. Razor gave him a somewhat surprised look until he finally burst out laughing. It doesn't matter what that girl wants or doesn't want. Razor's face instantly grew serene. The demons are going through very hard times since the last war. There are very few pure demons left, and we need to increase that number so that our species doesn't end up disappearing. She is not the only one who will have to submit to arranged marriages, so will her younger brother and many other pure demons, regardless of their social class. Razor raised both his hands to emphasize his words as a smile appeared on his face. It is for survival. Therefore, it is inconceivable that this brat would behave this way. Issei lowered his gaze, taking in everything he had heard. He stayed like that for a couple of seconds, until. What does it matter to me? Razor looked at him in astonishment. She's the one who gave me a second chance, so it doesn't matter what you say. I don't care if the demons will be extinct in a day or hundreds of years. If she's happy, it means I'll have accomplished my job as a servant. Issei waved his hand disapprovingly, clenching it tightly at the end. Razor looked at him seriously for several seconds, without saying a word. Brat, you're just as much of an idiot as she is. Razor replied, folding his arms as he looked at him with a big smug grin on his face. First, for thinking that the extinction of a species is worth the happiness of your mistress. And second, for thinking you can defeat me. Razor spread his arms wide, being a target everywhere. Go ahead, try any attack to make you realize the difference between us. Razor gave a quick glance behind his back, signaling Ravel to get the hell out of the place if he didn't want to come to any harm. Issei looked at him with great seriousness for a few seconds. Aren't you going to dodge it? Of course not, I won't need to lift a finger. Razor exclaimed, mocking him. A small smile appeared on Issei's face upon hearing his response. Then the chestnut bowed his gauntlet towards Razor, causing an orb considerably larger than the previous one to appear in his palm. I'll take your word for it. Razor merely nodded, his smug grin widening even further as he saw the small magical attack he was about to launch. You've got to be kidding me, I'm sure his physical condition is his real strength. Otherwise, I can't understand how she manages to defeat my queen. Issei gave a big sigh, feeling like a dizziness was starting to bother his entire body. I've already used 30%, the best thing, I'll use 60% in case things don't go as planned. Are you sure about this, partner? Drake questioned with clear concern in his words. Issei smiled at his friend's concern. Don't worry, he said he wouldn't move. And if he tries to, this attack is much bigger than the previous ones. He won't have any escape. Issei gave a small sigh, then widened his eyes to the max. Dragon shot. The great sonic wave burst from the gauntlet, completely obliterating everything in its path. It's dangerous. Razor widened his eyes slightly as he saw the attack, creating a magical orange circle that acted as a barrier. The attack hit the barrier hard, causing Razor to grit his teeth as he used all his strength to maintain the magic circle. After a few seconds, a small crack appeared in the barrier. What? Shouted Razor in great surprise as the entire barrier began to crack until it finally shattered into 1,000 pieces. Ai. Razor screamed with great force as he was engulfed by the dragon shot, causing only his figure to begin to release a large amount of blood. After that, Issei threw Riaz and Asia to the ground along with him. A second later, a huge explosion rose up all over the place, causing the roof of the school to be completely destroyed. President, Asia. shouted Issei with great concern, not seeing how they were doing due to the huge curtain of dust. "We're fine, Issei." Rias would reply, struggling to his feet as he rubbed his butt in pain from the fall. "You blew up half of Kuo Academy with just one attack. You're awesome." Asia would add, getting up from the ground in the same pain as Rias. When the dust finally began to dissipate, they could see that they were at the entrance of the academy, though the first floor and the others were already history. Beep. The three widened their eyes in shock at the sound of the voice, slowly beginning to turn around. "That hurt like hell. Now I can see how you defeated Ubeluna." Issei quickly stepped in front of the two as he saw that Razor was lying on the ground a few feet away. His entire body was surrounded by flames, with the exception of his face. On it, you could see that he was holding a huge fake smile, while a large amount of cold sweat was running down his face. "I'll never trust myself that much again, damn it. That really hurt." Razor would think rather upset, looking at Issei with great attention. How does a low-class scum have so much power? Razor would get up from the ground with great caution, something very rare for him. Issei felt his vision go a little blurry, adding to the fact that everything was moving in a strange way. Razor raised an eyebrow as Issei staggered to the side. A sinister smile appeared on his face after processing what he had seen. Of course. A low-class reincarnated devil wouldn't be able to stand up after making such a powerful attack. Razor straightened his gaze instantly, making everyone tense up more than they already were. "I won't trust myself. I'll finish you off before I regret not doing it." Razor spread wings of fire on his back similar to those of the phoenix, flying at a great speed towards where Issei was. The protagonist observed with great patience how the fist covered in fire slowly approached his face, dodging it by the hair and receiving a small burn on his cheek. A small rumble was heard in the place, added to a huge blizzard. After a second, Razor spat out a large amount of blood due to Issei landing a strong blow to his abdomen. Razor's eyes widened in rage and he wasted no time, kneeing him hard in the stomach that completely unbalanced Issei. Issei took a couple of steps back as his eyes trembled in pain. Razor wiped the blood from her mouth as she slowly approached him with a seriousness palpable on her face. Issei landed a strong blow to Razor's face, causing him to expel a large amount of blood. Even so, the pure demon was unfazed by the pain and struck him hard in the face, followed by another and another. Having taken a complete beating, Issei finally fell to the ground, half conscious. Razor took a few steps towards him while looking at him seriously. He stood in front of Issei, looking down at him with great superiority. "Issei, get up and use another dragon shot." Ria's scream made Razor look down at her. "This boy can't even move anymore," he thought the blonde while he looked at him in disgust. Even so, he gave his all to defend his master from him. "From what I understand, he was only reincarnated a month and a half ago," Razor recalled the great magic attack. "And he can already do attacks like that." A small mysterious gleam graced his eyes. "I don't like to admit it, but his power and high fidelity will come in handy when the time is right. Besides, if I keep having fun with him until I kill him, I'd be in pretty big trouble with Surziches, and that wouldn't do me any good." Razor slowly shifted his gaze from him to Ria's, making the woman jump from her murderous aura. If the security is on the side of the devils, why eliminate it? It doesn't make any sense. Razor raised his hand aiming to damage Ria's, starting to create a huge ball of fire. Then he better end this stupidity right now. A huge explosion would shake the screen, leaving everything covered in dust. Surziches, that he was watching the combat, he would smile with a mysterious aura around him. "That's right, Razor. If we manage to get the security under our control, all the plans we have in the future will come to fruition." Surziches rested his hand on his chin, making his mysterious smile grow even more. "If everything goes according to plan, I'll have to let the fallen angels know after the wedding, which unfortunately won't work out for you, Razor. I'm sorry for you, but if I can make Issei fall in love with my sister, everything will be entirely on my hands. Reigns. I will only need the small collaboration of my dear sister, who will surely agree to it." Rating game finale. Winner. House Phoenix. Even being semi-conscious, Issei could hear the voice that announced the end of the fight. He could only think of one thing before passing out. For some strange reason, he thought of her first, since Ria's was in a much more compromising position. He didn't know why, but in that single, small moment he had only been able to think of her. In her hair. In her smile. In her eyes. "I'm sorry to disappoint you, Tiamat." End of the here. So that's it for today's video guys. Before you go, just like the video and share it with your friends. Bye.